Hi, I'm Nancy Cosby, and I'm going to share with you the information and the literature review I did on perfectionism and burnout. A couple of reasons why I chose this as a topic for my research was because one, do feel like I have some perfectionistic tendencies, and I have also experienced burnout. And so I really wanted to dig a little deeper and just see maybe if there's a connection and what that might look like. And so that's the literature review information I'm going to share with you today. A background really on perfectionism and what it looks like when an agency is hiring a new employee is they're always looking for an employee that's hardworking. They have the willingness to go above and beyond, perseverance, not quitting until the job is done. So companies are really searching for the perfect employee. People who are perfectionists, people who will do the job right no matter the cost. But what happens when an employee gives too much? Are employees required to give until there's nothing left? Are there effective ways that allow an employee to invest in themselves as much as they invest in their company? So that's some of the things, information we're going to go over in this review and kind of discuss what that looks like in our current day perfectionistic world and how we respond to that. Does perfectionism lead to burnout in the workplace? Before we get started, I really want to go over perfectionism. Is it good or bad? Because I think it's kind of like a two-way street. I think sometimes we want to be perfectionists, we want to get things right, but then we also know that if we're too hard on ourselves, if we're too focused on getting something done exactly right, then it might not benefit us in the long run. Past research focused more on the negative impact of perfectionism. Research stated that this negative view of perfectionism was a result of a general tendency in the field of psychology to focus on the negative rather than recognizing the positive. And if you think back, you can kind of see this on how people parented previously and when they were looking at how to parent. Do you do negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement? Back in the day, they were really more structured and felt like a child should behave. Nowadays, we really focus more on positive reinforcement and how to encourage and motivate in a positive way rather than a negative way. So I think this just goes to show that with past research focusing on the more negative impact kind of fits that time period and really what our mindset was back then. Until Hamachek's work on normal and neurotic perfectionists in 1978, where a new conceptualization of perfectionism emerged, which identified positive aspects of the construct. So now we can kind of take a look at maybe the good and bad aspects of perfectionism and what that looks like. As I was doing my research, what I found was there's really two types of perfectionism. Childs and Stober, in their research, found that there's negative, socially prescribed perfectionism, and there's positive, self-oriented perfectionism. So with the negative, you have externally motivated beliefs that excessively high standards are expected by others. There's also acceptance by others as conditional or fulfilling these standards. You really look for the acceptance of others. Characterized by individuals' perceptions that others impose perfectionistic standards onto them. They feel like that's what's expected. And then on the self-oriented perfectionism, you have internally motivated beliefs that striving for perfection and being perfect are important, characterized by having a perfectionistic motivation for oneself. So you can kind of see the social focus and then the self-oriented that looks more on the internal value that one has for themselves in doing a good job and moving forward. Another view of the two, when I did research over Hill and Curran, what they found was perfectionistic concerns and perfectionistic strivings were the two types of perfectionisms. So with the concerns, there's concerns over making mistakes, fear of negative social evaluation, feels of discrepancy between one's expectations and performance, and negative reactions to imperfection. With the strivings, it's self-oriented striving for perfection and the setting of very high personal performance standards. As I was reviewing this information and really kind of reading into the research that these researchers did, I really started thinking about self-image and what that looks like and how when we're concerned over making mistakes or fear of negative social evaluation, or we just want to be loved and accepted by those around us, those are concerns because that's not the heart of what are the reason why behind what we're doing. So when we have strivings, we're self-oriented, we're striving for perfection and setting very high personal performance standards for ourselves. The image I chose to reflect on this slide was one of one person helping themselves up. And I feel like because this was such an example to me of low self-esteem and high self-esteem, I thought this was a great picture because the concerns are going to hold you down. If you're waiting for society to accept you, they're going to hold you down and make you feel like you're inadequate or you're not worthy or you're not good enough. The strivings, the self-determination, the self-motivation to go far, do well, is what's going to pull you up. And so to me, this image really just captured what these researchers found when they were viewing the difference between perfectionistic concerns and strivings. So focusing on the positive side of perfectionism was one way researchers found that helped employees feel valuable and decrease the amount of burnout. Of course, we do have to take a look at what burnout really is. I think all of us could give our own definition of what it looks like for us, but it has been defined as a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. That was Maslick and Leader's research that they found. Other researchers used their theory that burnout can be characterized by three dimensions: exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy. So I think, again, burnout can be described by what the researchers define it as, but I think you and I probably can relate and notice the symptoms rather than the definition. So symptoms of burnout are depression, fatigue, mental issues, illness, physical illness, suicidal thoughts. In the United States, 67% full-time workers reported feelings of burnout. So more than half have experienced what burnout is like. I think we can all kind of relate to those symptoms in different ways. And so understanding what those look like is an important piece of making sure we do the right thing and keeping ourselves, just taking care of ourselves and practicing self-care at work and at home. So how to avoid burnout. That was what was really interesting is when I was doing research over burnout and perfectionism. The research that I found regarding burnout had a lot of research done on things that help treat burnout: work engagement, workplace friendship, finding a job that matches one's skills and abilities, religious coping, physical activity, various coping skills. So what they found in this research, when these things were increased, burnout decreased. So the more someone had work engagement in the workplace, the less they had the symptoms of burnout or felt burnout. Workplace friendship, connection between those around them, that social piece that's so important for us. The higher that was, the lower the rate of burnout. Finding a job that matches one's skills and abilities, super important because you're never going to find your groove if you're in a position that doesn't fit what your passion and your goals are. And so when someone tries to do a job that's just not a good fit, they are going to feel inadequate, which makes you have more symptoms of burnout. So finding a job that matches your skills and ability is going to increase that self-motivation and decrease the burnout symptoms that you may experience. Religious coping is another way that researchers found was super helpful when helping people really treat burnout and avoid it. And that can just be the spiritual component connecting to your higher power, whatever that looks like for you. Physical activity is also important. It's that psychosocial thing that we look at, how raising your heart rate and moving, getting your blood flow, how it really can help fight burnout and keep you active and healthy. And then I also listed various coping skills because I work in the mental health profession and I work with clients trying to teach and coach on finding ways to positive cope instead of negative cope. I think that's important. I didn't really see any specific research done on that, but I really do believe that mindfulness techniques, things like that, are super helpful when we are trying to cope with things. So the conclusion that I found in this research really is that negative perfectionism can lead to burnout in the workplace based on the internal stressors it creates. Positive perfectionism can be good as long as coping skills are in place. And the effect of burnout can decrease when the environment is healthy and people are engaged and supported. So what does that really look like for adult learners and adult leaders? The implications that I found as I was reading this research and really looking at the different components, the things that stood out to me the most were to be aware of the signs of burnouts. Know your people. Know when they're experiencing those things. Incorporate trainings on positive and negative perfectionism. Teach people. Wisdom is a powerful thing. And so the more you can educate people on what that looks like, the more you can say, hey, it's okay that you feel this way. This is normal. Let's look at this. Really help make teachable moments for staff, for students, things like that. Provide support and resources. I promise you, because I do work at a mental health agency, and I do feel like I kind of have a mental file of resources. There are people out there who do not know where to start. So making sure they know you have support and resources is important in leading students and being a good employer or leader. Offer understanding and solutions if an employee or student finds themselves dealing with burnout. One of the phrases we use at my job is provide soft landings, meaning provide support and a place for people to come when they do find themselves dealing with burnout or issues or personal life, work life, whatever that looks like. Creating an environment where teamwork and support is essential will make a difference in employees feeling confident in their positions and the role they play in the organization. I think we found that when we were looking at the ways to treat and avoid burnout was that work engagement, the team friendship, the team atmosphere. So I think creating that environment is super important. Which, as I was looking at the information, a quote came to mind. The atmosphere you permit determines the product you produce. I've always loved that quote, and I really feel like it is so true when it comes to personal life, work life, in society. The atmosphere you permit, the atmosphere you allow in your world determines the product you produce. And so I think as leaders and teachers, we can create an atmosphere that determines the product we produce that can be positive and self-motivating, and we can really have an opportunity to change the world one student at a time. Thank you for joining this presentation. I look forward to questions, feedback, and discussion. I have listed my email there. If you do have anything you want to, any comments, feedback, anything like that you'd like to email me, I'd be glad to answer those. I have also included 2 pages of references. And so if you're interested in finding out more about burnout and perfectionism and how they work together, then you can do some more reading on that. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great night.